Hello everyone, welcome to another video. I'm Cindy Winget, the author of Gothic Horror Mashups, and welcome to my channel. So today's video is a little bit spur of the moment. Like I just had an idea in my mind that I just wanted to talk about. So it's a little bit different than anything I've talked about. I usually talk about thrillers and horror mostly on my channel, but today I'm going to talk about a science fiction novel and a fantasy series and compare and contrast them a little bit. So a little bit different than anything I've done, but it just sounded fun, so I just spontaneously wanted to do this video. I hope you enjoy it. But we're going to be talking about Wheel of Time and Dune. So Dune is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. I don't want to say it's my favorite series of all time because, to be honest, I don't love the entire series. But Dune itself, like the first book, I absolutely adore. I've read it and reread it many times. And I love this edition. It's so pretty. And it has these blue sprayed edges. So I used to have a different copy of this, but I always thought it was pretty ugly. And so when I saw this one, I had to get it. I'm not the type of person that keeps a bunch of editions of their favorite book. I just don't feel the need to have multiple copies of the same book. So I am planning on getting rid of my other one. But this was just too beautiful to pass up. And like I said, it's one of my favorite books of all time. So I just needed to have this copy. So anyways, that's not what this video is about. So this has always been one of my favorites, and I read it in 9th grade in my English class, and I'm so eternally grateful to that teacher for doing that, or for making us read this. It went a little bit over my head, I was only in 9th grade, and it had a lot of big words that I wasn't used to. It had a lot of, politics and big ideas and epic scopes that I wasn't familiar with at the time. And it was really, really, really long, so it was a difficult read. And if it wasn't a requirement, I probably never would have read it. But I just fell in love with this story. And so I'll always be forever grateful to my 9th grade teacher for making us read this. So Wheel of Time is one of my husband's absolute favorite series of all time. He loves it. He's listened to the audiobooks many, many times. We've watched the show together, and he just adores it. And while I do really like Wheel of Time, I think it's a great series, I like Dune more. And he's the opposite. He likes Dune, but he adores Wheel of Time. And this is a really, really long series. There's 15 books if you also read the prequel. And, if it wasn't for him pushing me, I probably would have petered out at some point. But because of him, I pushed through and I read every single one of them, even though each book is like 1,000 pages long. And to be honest, the middle books can be a little bit difficult to get through. So like the first 3 or 4 books are really good. And then the middle ones, they're a little bit bland. There's a lot of characters, and I feel like you don't really need to necessarily know all these characters. But I will say that Robert Jordan, you're plugging along and just like, okay. And then all of a sudden he'll shock you with something and you're like, what? And then it'll be a lot of blandness again, and then he'll shock you again. And so he's very good at that. And then the last few books, of course, are really, really good, including the ones that Brandon Sanderson wrote after his death. But anyways, I wouldn't have gotten through it if it weren't for my husband pushing me. But when I finished the series, I got thinking about it, and I'm like, Dune and Wheel of Time are very similar. So I'm going to put these down because these are both very thick books, and they're very heavy, and they're kind of hurting my hands, or my wrists, I should say. So I'm going to put them down. I've seen different YouTube videos over the years comparing Star Wars to Harry Potter, where they're both orphans, and they have a guy friend and a girlfriend, and the guy and the girl get together, meaning Hermione and Ron got together, and then Princess Leia and Han Solo got together, and and they both have an older mentor in Dumbledore and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and there's just all these similarities where they're it's the same story, but one's fantasy and one's sci-fi, or whatever. I've seen stuff like that, and I'm like, oh, that's funny, that's so true, But I was like, what? Wheel of Time and Dune is like that too. And I don't know. I'm a book nerd, so I found it fascinating to think about. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, this would make a fun video. So it's not going to be a long video, but I just wanted to talk about the similarities between these two series because they're both beloved, they're both very popular. But I will say I am going to be talking about minor spoilers. So this video is going to work best for you if you have already read both of these series, or at least have read like the first couple books, and you're familiar. Well, not with Dune. Just the first book of Dune will be fine. But Wheel of Time, you kind of need to be a little bit into the story, or at least have watched the TV show or something to get something out of this video, because it will have minor spoilers, because it's going to be hard to talk about without telling what the book's about. So if you don't want to be spoiled, then this is probably not the video for you. You can come back later if you want to, after you've read it. So anyways, I just want to let you know that I will be talking a little, not like super in depth or anything, but I will be saying certain things. And if you don't want to know those certain things, then maybe click off now. So one thing about Dune, I know I said I'm not going to hold this up, and then I do, but it's just really heavy, so I might be just like going up and down and up and down. Anyways, this is just kind of a random fact that I found interesting. So I read this article a little bit ago talking about J.R.R. Tolkien and Frank Herbert, because apparently Tolkien did not like Frank Herbert's writing, and I just thought that was interesting and I wanted to know why. So this article talks about how Tolkien is very much into like good versus evil, and having the hero be the hero and different things like this. To him, that's what makes a fantasy story or an epic tale. And he didn't like how Frank Herbert made Paul, because if you've read Dune or seen the movies, you know that Paul is a gray character. He's not the hero, but he's also not the hero. So depending on your worldview, or depending on which person you're talking to, Paul could be the villain or he could be the hero. And even Paul himself doesn't know if he's the hero or the villain. And he has issues with that. He struggles with his own morality because he doesn't know if he's the good guy or not. And I find that fascinating. And so I just thought it was funny that, Tolkien was like, oh no, that's not how you tell an epic tale. That's not the way we do things. But, Tolkien wrote in the 30s. I mean, it was a little bit different. And so in the 60s, Frank Herbert was like, well, let's think about things a little bit differently, and he came out with this whole new breed of character. And I just thought that was very interesting. So if you're a nerd like me, you might find it interesting too. So that's just kind of a side note that doesn't really have anything to do with what I want to talk about, but I just thought I'd mention it. Some of the similarities, between these two is definitely in the character of Paul and Rand al'Thor, because they're both reluctant heroes. They were kind of thrust into this role that they didn't want and they didn't ask for. And they're both like part of this prophecy, which kind of became a running theme for fantasy. There's lots of fantasy novels out there that have to do with prophecies. But, that's kind of characteristic of, Wheel of Time is what's considered high fantasy or epic fantasy, where it's very like big in scope and very epic. It's not just like a character-driven story. It's not just one storyline or plot line that's chugging along. And Dune is what's considered space opera. And so that's kind of like, it's science fiction, but it has fantasy elements to it, because the science is a little bit fantastical and not hard science, And so you kind of had to suspend your disbelief a little bit. But the same thing, space opera is very much epic in scale and is very big. So you have a lot of politics, you have a lot of nations, you have a lot of people. It's not just this one guy's going on his day, It's not just Harry Potter at one school doing one thing. It's, lots of nations, lots of cultures, lots of people. And same with Dune, you have lots of planets, you have lots of different people, and you have wars, and you have different things going on. And so that's one thing that I really enjoy about these two series. So they're both reluctant, though, to take on their roles, and they're part of this prophecy. And they both think they can get away from their roles, but life's not letting them. Prophecy will be fulfilled whether they want it to or not. And they kind of try to run away from it for a while before embracing it. And then both of their societies are very similar, because you have the Bene Gesserit in Dune, and then you have the Aiel in Wheel of Time. And they're both very similar, because it's all women. Only females can be Aiel and Bene Gesserits, and they're the very, very powerful ones of these stories. They have all the magic, they have all the powers. The Bene Gesserits are called witches because even though it's scientifically based, they're so powerful that it seems like magic, and so people call them witches. And so it's just interesting because these women have all the power, and then you have this one man that comes and he has the power. And even though that's part of the prophecy and it's supposed to happen, these women, they've been waiting for this to happen. You know, the Bene Gesserit they had like these secret genetic plans where they have been trying to get the Kwisatz Haderach, which is basically the one man that can have the same ability as the Bene Gesserit, where he can look into the future and he can see all of the people in his past, you know, all of his ancestors. And so for the Bene Gesserit, they can only see the female line. And so going back to like the first Bene Gesserit, they can see their female line. But the Kwisatz Haderach, he's going to be able to see both the female and the male line and see all of their ancestors and have all that knowledge and that wisdom. And then, of course, he'll have like his prescient abilities where he'll be able to look into the future as well. And so they've been actively trying to get this Kwisatz Haderach, and they've been trying to manipulate politics and nations, all for the sake of getting the bloodlines they need to create this Kwisatz Haderach. But when it actually happens and they actually get the Kwisatz Haderach, all of a sudden they're shocked to their very core because they cannot control him the way they thought they could. They thought they were going to be able to manipulate him, and he was going to be their weapon. He was going to be there to help them, you know, in their other schemes. But Paul's like, nope, I don't care what you guys want. I'm doing my own thing. And it's the same with Randall Thor, because you have the Aiel. Again, all the women have the power, and the males, they used to have the power, but it's been tainted, and they can't access it because it makes you literally mad. Like, you will go crazy if you try to use the power, and most of them can't use the power anyways. But then you have Randall Thor, and he comes along, and in fulfillment of prophecy as the Dragon Reborn, he's the one man that can wield this power and can take away that taint for the men. And the Aiel, again, they've been waiting for this day. They've been wanting this day. And, you know, they've sent out their sisters out into the world, just like the Bene Gesserit, trying to find the Dragon Reborn and trying to, you know, push him along his way and on his journey. But Randall Thor is just like Paul. He doesn't want this. He doesn't want to follow the Aiel. He doesn't want to do what they told him to do. And again, they try to control him, and it backfires majorly. And that's one of my favorite parts of all the time, actually, is a particular scene. I don't want to say it because it really is a huge spoiler, but something happens with one of the Aiel who tries to control him, and he just goes crazy, and it's fantastic. So, same thing. They're all trying to manipulate this one man to do what they want to do, and he's like, no, I'm not going to do that, you know? Yeah, I fulfilled the prophecy. Yeah, I'm the Dragon Reborn. Yeah, I'm the Kwisatz Haderach, but I ain't going to do what you told me to do. So I just find it very fascinating. I love that. And then you have Paul, who gets involved with the Fremen. So he's on this planet called Dune. Well, that's what the Fremen call it. The rest of the Landsraad, which is, you know, the rest of the planets, they call it Arrakis, but the Fremen call it Dune. As you can tell from the name Dune, there's sand dunes, and the whole planet is just one big miserable desert. And so the Fremen, they very much value water. You know, that's like their main thing. You do not waste water, and, you know, water is a hot commodity. And they're also very good fighters. You know, they train their kids from when they're really young to be these awesome fighters, and they hide out in the desert, and people think there's maybe like a few thousand of them out there, not realizing that there's millions, like a whole huge nation of Fremen. You know, they think there's just a few thousand of these weirdos living out in the desert, you know, but they're not. And so then in Wheel of Time, you have the Aiel. Oh man, I've been calling it Aiel the whole time, haven't I? When I was talking about the women, I meant the Aes Sedai. So, people that are fans of Wheel of Time have probably been freaking out right now, saying, it's not the Aiel, it's not the Aiel. So I am so sorry, I can't believe I did that. So this whole time I was talking about the women, I meant the Aes Sedai. I was talking about the Aes Sedai. So now I'm going to talk about the Aiel. And they're the ones that are like the Fremen. You know, they're desert people. They really value water. They're awesome fighters. They think other people are squishy and weak. You know, like their mentality, their culture, everything about the Aiel and the Fremen are very, very similar. I just think it's funny because then you have Paul and Rand where even their friends, you know, that are trying to help them sometimes seem almost afraid of them because they don't really truly know what's going on. You know, because like for Paul, he's got the Fremen who are his friends and they think he's their messiah and he's come to lead them. But, you know, they're a little bit afraid of his power too. And I think Rand al'Thor, you know, people have been so prejudiced against men having the power and that it makes you crazy that they're just like, oh, I don't know about this. This is a little insane. I don't know. Like, so it's just funny. And it's not even just culturally that the Aiel and the Fremen, you know, are both desert warriors, basically. It's not even the similarities of their cultures. It's the fact that they're both the group of people that help them like on their way to fulfilling that prophecy the most. So like everybody has a different idea of what the Dragon Reborn is supposed to be. You know, some people want the Dragon Reborn to come, some people don't want the Dragon Reborn to come, and they all have their different opinions on what it's going to mean to have the Dragon Reborn come. And the Aiel are no different. They have their own reasons for wanting him or their own ideas about how it's going to come to pass and different things. And like it's the same with the Bene Gesserit and the Fremen, you know, they have different ideas about what the prophecy is for their culture and for their nation. But the Fremen and the Aiel, they're like the group of people that help Paul and help Rand fulfill that prophecy and become the person that they're supposed to be. You know, they're the driving force behind it. And you know, in both cases. Dune came out in the 60s and Wheel of Time came out in the 80s. And so I would not be a bit surprised if Robert Jordan got a lot of inspiration from Dune because they're just so similar, you know? And so I'm like, there's no way that he just came up with this on his own and it just happened to be a lot like Dune. Like, especially for how popular Dune is, there's no way. You know, people I think that love Dune will love Wheel of Time, and people that love Wheel of Time, I think, will love Dune. Because I really think, as far as like the core storyline, I think they're pretty much the same. But I mean, I'm not saying that Robert Jordan copied him and that he's, you know, plagiarized or anything. I'm not saying that. Not at all. But I could tell he got inspiration from it, you know, and so I think if you are a lover of one, then you will be a lover of the other one. So anyways, that's pretty much all I have to say about this. I know it's kind of a weird video, but I just have a deep love for both of these stories and I just thought it was interesting and fun and I just wanted to talk about it. So like I said, this is just a spur of the moment video, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I post videos every Friday and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya.